Hi everyone. If you've already seen the intro to this story on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook, you can skip ahead to 3 minutes and 20 seconds. It's marked as full story on the progress bar. For better pacing, you can also set the playback speed to 1.3x. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any new stories. I won't keep you any longer. Enjoy listening. Cheers.
They erased me from Grandpa's will, but I had his secret copy. They read the will while I was still wearing the black dress I had slept in, and when my aunt smiled at the words, "Maya receives nothing," I realized grief had not made my family softer. It had only made them faster. My name is Maya Collins. I am 23, and for the last 5 years, my life had been split between night classes, pharmacy runs, sponge baths, and the old greenhouse my grandfather refused to leave. Grandpa Arthur raised me after my mother died. He taught me to change a tire, make coffee strong enough to scare a nurse, and never trust people who lowered their voices when money was mentioned. The lawyer sat at the dining table like he wished the table would swallow him. My Aunt Diane sat beside him in a cream coat that cost more than my car. My Uncle Paul leaned against the mantel, phone in hand, pretending to check work emails from his operations director job at Diane's property company. My cousin Elise filmed herself crying in the hallway until she saw me watching, then slipped the phone into her purse. The lawyer cleared his throat. The document dated March 9th supersedes all prior versions. The estate passes to the Collins Family Holdings Trust, administered by Diane Collins. Maya Collins is acknowledged for her companionship, but receives no distribution. Companionship. That was what they called 5 years of lifting him after falls, arguing with insurance, cleaning blood from the bathroom tile, and sleeping with one ear open because his oxygen machine clicked differently before it failed. I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because my chest needed somewhere to put the pain. Grandpa signed a will last summer. He gave me a copy. Diane's face did not change, but her hand closed around the silver pen in front of her. "Sweetheart, your grandfather became confused near the end. You know that better than anyone." Paul added, "You were exhausted. Maybe you misunderstood." The lawyer looked at his folder. He did not look at me. I reached for my canvas bag, the one everyone teased because I carried receipts, medicine lists, and emergency snacks like a paranoid raccoon. Diane's voice sharpened just enough for me to hear the panic under the perfume. "Maya, this is not the time for theatrics." That was when I knew. They were not surprised I mentioned the copy. They were terrified I might actually have it. I opened the bag, touched the envelope Grandpa had taped beneath my dresser drawer, and saw 3 words written in his shaky handwriting across the seal: "Trust no one." Before I could pull it out, the lawyer's phone buzzed. He read the screen, went pale, and whispered, "Diane, we have a problem. Arthur's original attorney is here." Then the doorbell rang again, slow and deliberate, like someone on the porch already knew where every body was buried. The sound of that bell made everyone move except me. Diane stood first, smoothing her coat with both hands, which was what she did when she needed control back. Paul pushed away from the mantel. Elise appeared from the hallway with red eyes that had not smeared her mascara. "I will handle this," Diane said. But the lawyer, Mr. Voss, stopped her. "You should let me answer it." That sentence changed the room. Diane looked at him as if he had forgotten who paid him. He swallowed, opened the door, and an older woman stepped inside carrying a leather briefcase. I recognized her from Grandpa's kitchen table, Ruth Calder, the estate attorney he had called the only person in this town who still reads before signing. Ruth looked at me first. "Maya, I am sorry for your loss." My throat closed. "Thank you for coming." Diane smiled thinly. "Ruth, this is a private family reading." Ruth glanced at the folder on the table. "Then why is Michael Voss reading a will I never transferred to him?" The room went silent in that careful way families use when a lie has bumped into furniture. Mr. Voss said, "I was retained after Mr. Collins executed a later document." "Was he examined for capacity that week?" Diane laughed softly. Arthur was dramatic, not incompetent. Ruth did not blink. "That was not an answer." Paul stepped in with his corporate voice. "We respect your history with Dad, but this is painful. Maya is grieving and confused. Let us not make her cling to paperwork." There it was again, the little cage they kept building around me, confused, emotional, exhausted, attached. If I protested, I proved them right. If I stayed quiet, they wrote the truth without me. I pulled the envelope from my bag and placed it on the table. Diane's eyes dropped to Grandpa's handwriting. For 1 second, her face loosened. Ruth's voice softened. Did Arthur give that to you himself? Yes. He told me not to open it unless everyone suddenly started calling me unstable. Elise whispered. That sounds kind of manipulative, Maya. I turned to her. He said it 2 days after you asked him to sign a blank trustee authorization because Diane was too busy to explain forms. Elise went pale. Diane's smile vanished. Ruth opened her briefcase. Then nobody leaves with any estate documents today. I am filing a notice of potential contest and a preservation demand by morning. Paul gave a short laugh. You cannot freeze everything because a caretaker found an envelope. Ruth looked at him. She was not his caretaker. She was his named beneficiary, medical proxy. Under a signed agreement your sister tried very hard to bury. Mr. Voss closed his folder like it had burned him. Then Diane leaned close to me and whispered, so only I could hear, "You have no idea what you just started." That night, I did not sleep in Grandpa's house. Ruth drove me to her office because Diane suddenly insisted the locks needed to be changed for insurance. She said it in the driveway while neighbors watched from behind curtains, her voice gentle enough to sound reasonable. Maya, this is not punishment, she said. You are emotional and I cannot have estate property disappearing. My clothes are inside, I said. Paul lifted one shoulder. We will pack them carefully. The word we made my stomach turn. Those drawers held Grandpa's medicine notes, birthday cards, and the notebook where I tracked his blood pressure. They also held proof that I had not imagined the last 5 years. At Ruth's office, she made tea neither of us drank and opened Grandpa's envelope. There was a signed copy of the will, a caregiver agreement, a medical proxy, and a letter addressed to me. The will was dated July 18th, 8 months before he died. It left the house to me, gave Diane and Paul symbolic distributions of $1 each. It also included a no contest clause. I read the line 3 times because my hands were shaking. Ruth pointed to Grandpa's initials. Arthur knew exactly what he was doing. Then how can they have a later will? That is what we need to find out. She asked me to describe March 9th. I remembered that day because Grandpa had been recovering from pneumonia, sleeping in short bursts, confused by the television, and furious that Diane had brought a notary to the house without warning. I had been at work for 4 hours when Diane arranged a substitute caregiver and told me to go be young for once. Ruth's pen stopped. Who was the substitute? A woman named Carla from Diane's company, not a nurse. She works front desk. The next morning, my phone exploded. Cousins I had not spoken to in years sent messages that sounded copied. Think about what Grandpa would want. Do not make this ugly. Diane sacrificed too. One aunt wrote, Your mother would be ashamed of you for turning grief into greed. Then I saw Elise's Instagram story. A photo of Grandpa's porch, black ribbon on the railing, and a caption. Some people mistake inheritance for love. No names, of course. Diane never threw a rock while anyone could photograph her hand. At noon, Ruth called. Maya, did you authorize anyone to withdraw $8,000 from Arthur's account in January? No, I had a debit card only for groceries and prescriptions. The bank record says the transfer went to Collins Family Holdings for emergency home expenses. The roof was fixed by Grandpa's neighbor for $600. Ruth exhaled. Then this stopped being only a will contest. A text from Diane appeared. Come to the house tonight alone, or I release what Arthur wrote about you. I showed Ruth the text before I answered. She took one look and said, Do not go alone and do not let her control the room. She said Grandpa wrote something about me. Then she can send it through counsel. That sounded strong in an office with locked cabinets and court calendars on the wall. It sounded weaker at 7 that evening, when I stood on Grandpa's porch with Ruth beside me and heard laughter inside my house. Diane opened the door wearing Grandpa's old cardigan, his favorite. You brought a lawyer to a family conversation, she said. You brought a fake will to a funeral week, I said. Inside, Paul had stacked boxes by the stairs. Elise sat on the couch with a laptop open. My room door was shut, but I could see trash bags in the hall. I walked toward them. Those better not be mine. Elise closed the laptop. We were sorting clutter. Diane said you hoard medical stuff. Those are records. Paul stepped between me and the hall. Maya, breathe for a second. Nobody is attacking you. That sentence hit hard. They would make a decision, block a door, take a document, then tell me my reaction was the real problem. Grandpa had called it polishing the knife. Diane held out a folded page. Arthur was worried about your stability. He wrote this after you screamed at him. My hands went cold. I remembered that fight. I had cried because he refused to go to the hospital after a fall. He had apologized the next morning and asked for pancakes. Ruth reached for the page. Diane pulled it back. No, Maya should hear it from family. She read in a soft, injured voice. Maya becomes angry when challenged. I worry she sees my home as her reward. Elise looked down. Paul shook his head like a disappointed manager. I wanted to defend myself, but the room was built for me to lose. If I shouted, I was unstable. If I cried, I was greedy. If I stayed silent, the quote stood there like truth. Ruth said, "Read the date." Diane paused. "Read the date aloud," Ruth repeated. "It says February 3rd. I stared at her. Grandpa was in the hospital on February 3rd. Diane's lips tightened. He came home that evening. No, he did not. He was admitted until the 6th. I slept beside his bed. Ruth held out her hand again. Give me the letter. For the first time that night, Diane lost polish. This is personal property. It is alleged evidence, and you just used it to threaten my client. Paul's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his face changed. Diane, Carla is asking why Ruth Calder wants her address. Diane turned so sharply the cardigan slipped from one shoulder. A paper fell from its pocket. I picked it up before she could move. It was not a letter from Grandpa. It was a receipt for a notary, paid by Collins Family Holdings on March 9th. I held the receipt between two fingers. Diane reached for it, smiling. That is company paperwork, she said. You do not understand what you are holding. Ruth took the receipt from me and photographed it. I understand it says your company paid the notary for the will giving your company control. Paul stepped closer. Ruth, accusations like that can damage reputations. Then protect yours by backing away from the boxes. The boxes. I pushed past Paul and opened the first one. My sweaters were folded on top, but underneath were Grandpa's binders. Pharmacy receipts, appointment summaries, repair invoices, bank statements. The second box held framed pictures with the backs removed. The third held his old laptop. I turned to Elise. You were going through his computer. She stood too fast. I was helping preserve memories. You were deleting something. Her eyes flashed toward Diane before she answered. That tiny glance told me more than any confession. Diane sighed like I had disappointed her again. Maya, this paranoia is why Arthur changed his mind. You confuse care with ownership. Stop using his name like a weapon, I said. She stepped closer until I could smell mint on her breath. Then stop pretending a lonely old man did not say whatever kept you from abandoning him. My worst fear had been that Grandpa only loved me because I stayed. Diane knew that. She had watched me cancel dates, skip internships, and drop classes when his health crashed. Now she reached into that wound and smiled. Ruth's voice cut through. We are leaving with Maya's belongings and copies of all estate-related records in these boxes. Paul laughed. You are leaving with what I allow. The room froze. Even Diane looked at him. Then Mrs. Alvarez from next door stepped inside without knocking. She was 70, 5 feet tall, and had fed half the block during storms. Arthur gave me a key, she said calmly. He also told me to come if there were too many Collinses in the house. Paul's face reddened. This is private. Mrs. Alvarez looked at the boxes. Funny, because the trash bags with Maya's name are on the curb. I ran outside. 3 black bags sat by the bins. One had split open. My nursing textbook was wet from melting snow, and Grandpa's birthday card to me lay face down in dirty slush. Something in me went quiet, not calm. Quiet. I picked up the card, walked back inside, and laid it on the table. You threw away the last card he gave me. Diane looked at it, then at me. It was in a pile of paper. The lie felt obscene. Mrs. Alvarez touched my arm. Mija, Arthur left something with me too. Diane snapped her head toward her. What did he leave with you? Mrs. Alvarez did not answer. She only looked at Ruth and said, It is not safe in this house anymore. Mrs. Alvarez would not say another word inside the house. She walked us across the driveway to her kitchen, while Diane stood on Grandpa's porch like she owned the street. On Mrs. Alvarez's table sat a cookie tin. She pushed it toward Ruth. Arthur brought this over in December. He said if Maya ever looked cornered, I should give it to a lawyer, not to family. My hands trembled as Ruth opened it. Inside were 2 flash drives, a sealed letter, and printed emails. Each had his notes in the margins. The first one was from Diane to Paul. We need the old will neutralized before the spring valuation, or the acquisition becomes impossible. I looked up. What acquisition? Collins Family Holdings was negotiating with a developer. Mrs. Alvarez crossed herself. For the whole block? For the house, Ruth said. Arthur's corner parcel is needed for a medical office complex. Grandpa had turned down buyers for years. He said the house was the last place my mother laughed before she got sick, and nobody was paving it into parking spaces while he breathed. The next said, Maya is the obstacle. Dad listens to her. If she gets ownership, deal is dead. I heard my pulse. Ruth kept sorting. There are emails about caregiver burnout, family concern, mental instability. They were building a narrative. Mrs. Alvarez held the teapot. He knew they were doing it. The sealed letter was for me. Ruth asked if I wanted to read it there. I nodded, though part of me wanted to run. Grandpa's handwriting crawled across the page, shaky but clear. He wrote that Diane started visiting only after the first developer offer. He wrote that Paul asked for access to online banking to simplify things. He wrote that Elise recorded him when he was tired, then cut clips to make him sound confused. Then one line broke me. If they tell you I doubted your love, remember that frightened people will borrow a dead man's voice when their own lies are not enough. I pressed the paper to my mouth. Outside, a car door slammed. Paul's voice carried through the window. We are not letting them leave with stolen property. Ruth gathered the tin. Mrs. Alvarez, did Arthur give this to you voluntarily? Yes, and my grandson saw him do it. That helps us. There was pounding at the back door. Elise shouted, Maya, stop making this worse. Diane says she can still help you if you cooperate. I almost laughed. Help meant silence. Cooperate meant disappear. Family meant sign whatever made them richer. We are going to my office now. But when we opened the front door, 2 police cars were pulling up. Diane stood near them, crying, pointing at me while an officer listened. The first thing I heard was her saying, She is unstable, and she stole documents from my father's estate. The officers separated us in Mrs. Alvarez's yard. Diane kept one hand pressed to her chest like grief heard on command. Paul stood behind her, calm again, speaking in the language of liability and estate protection. An officer asked me, Did you remove documents from the residence? Ruth answered before I could. My client removed her own belongings and accepted documents Arthur left with a neighbor. She has been spiraling for months. Arthur was afraid to upset her. I looked at the officer. My grandfather gave me a will and gave Mrs. Alvarez a tin. Diane changed the locks before I could get my clothes. The officer's expression shifted, just enough for Diane to notice. She dabbed at tears that were not there. Then Elise lifted her phone. I did not realize she was live until comments started popping over the screen. My name, Grandpa's name, shocked faces. She had framed me in the yard, wet textbook under my arm, hair messy, eyes swollen. The caption read, When grief turns into theft. Elise, turn that off, Ruth said. Elise held the phone higher. People deserve to know what is happening. No, you want people to see me surrounded by police? I said. Diane whispered, Maya, please do not make a scene. If I looked broken, they would call me unstable. If I looked composed, they would call me cold. So I looked at Elise's phone and spoke clearly. My grandfather's attorney is beside me. Diane's company paid the notary for the will that gives her company control. My belongings were thrown in trash bags. If you are watching this, save the video before it disappears. Elise's face drained. Her thumb moved fast, but not fast enough. The live had already caught Diane grabbing her wrist. End it right now, Diane hissed. For the first time, the performance cracked in public. Mateo, Mrs. Alvarez's grandson, arrived holding his phone. I saved it, he said, and I have the doorbell footage from when Mr. Collins gave my grandma the tin. Paul pointed at him. You are interfering in a legal matter. Mateo shrugged. I work in IT, not magic. Cameras record things. The officer asked Diane whether she wanted to file a formal theft report. She hesitated because a formal report meant statements, evidence, dates. A public accusation was useful. A sworn one was dangerous. Ruth saw it too. Officer, if Ms. Collins files, we will provide the emails referencing the acquisition and the paid notary. Diane's jaw tightened. This family has been through enough. By midnight, Elise's deleted live had been reposted by 3 neighbors and 1 gossip page. By morning, Diane's voicemail was full. At 9:12, Ruth received an email from the Developers Council asking whether there was a material dispute affecting title. At 9:15, Diane texted me one sentence. You just cost us 7 figures. 7 figures. I read that text in Ruth's office bathroom where I had gone to cry. Instead, I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Not I am sorry. Not your grandfather would hate this. Not we need to talk. You just cost us 7 figures. When I came back, Ruth was at her desk using an old laptop. Maya, I need you to prepare yourself. Some of this may be ugly. It already is ugly. Ugly can have layers. The first drive held the July will, the caregiver agreement, bank accounts, and a note titled, People Who Benefit If I Look Confused. Grandpa had made columns. Diane, Paul, Elise, Mr. Voss, Carla, and a man named Grant Bell, the developer's local broker. Beside Elise's name, he had written, Wants Diane's approval more than truth. Elise and I had shared a room during family holidays. She knew how my mother's death hollowed out Grandpa. She knew why I stayed. The second held audio. Ruth warned me before playing them. The first was Grandpa's voice, weak but steady. If Maya hears this, they are doing it when they smile and call her fragile. I covered my mouth. His voice continued. Diane wants the house in a trust she controls. Paul wants the commission. Elise wants a job at the company. They are not evil every minute, which is what makes this hard. Ruth paused it. Did you know Paul had a commission tied to the sale? No, he told everyone he was just helping Diane. Then we need his employment records. My phone buzzed again, this time from Brooke, my former friend. Her message said, I hope you know I tried to stay out of this. Diane is telling people you drugged Arthur to make him sign the July will. My vision blurred. Ruth read the message and cursed under her breath. That is defamation, and it is also projection. What do you mean? She tapped Grandpa's March medical notes. The later will was signed during recovery from pneumonia. If anyone needed him impaired, it was them. I remembered Diane insisting Grandpa take anxiety medication before hard talks. I remembered Paul bringing smoothies after doctor visits. I remembered Carla calling me 3 times during my shift on March 9th, asking harmless questions that kept me away longer. Then Brooke sent a second message. There is a staff meeting tomorrow. Diane is making us sign statements that you had access to company checks and were obsessed with the house. I had never touched company checks. Ruth stood. Do not answer her yet. But I was looking at the photo Brooke attached. It showed a conference table, a stack of prepared statements, and one bold sentence at the top. Maya Collins exploited a vulnerable elder for financial gain. At the bottom was Brooke's name already typed under a signature line. Brooke called before Ruth could decide what to do with the photo. I put her on speaker because I did not trust myself to remember every word. She did not say hello. I cannot sign this. Ruth leaned forward. Brooke, this is Ruth Calder. This call is not being recorded unless you consent. Brooke gave a bitter laugh. At this point, I wish it was. I said, Why did you stop talking to me? There was a long pause. Because Diane told everyone you were under investigation for elder abuse. She said if we contacted you, we could become witnesses and lose our jobs. You believed that? I believed I needed rent money, she said. Then I saw the statement. They are making it sound like you stole from the company and manipulated Arthur. Paul said you forged his signature. Ruth took notes. Who drafted the statements? Paul brought them from legal. Mr. Voss's assistant emailed the files. That name again. Voss had not been some random lawyer who replaced Ruth. He had been part of the machinery. Brooke lowered her voice. There is more. Diane told Carla to say Arthur was alert on March 9th, but Carla was not there the whole time. I stood so fast the chair hit the wall. Where did she go? To lunch with Paul. I saw her expense receipt because I process reimbursements. Ruth's pen stopped. How long was she gone? Almost 2 hours. Grandpa had been alone with Diane, Paul, a notary they paid, and a document that erased me. Brooke whispered. Carla came back upset. She said Arthur kept asking for Maya. Diane told her he was sundowning. Brooke, do not sign anything. If you provide information, use a personal device and stick to what you saw. Brooke breathed unevenly. Diane scheduled a staff meeting at 5. She wants signatures before the title company call. After she hung up, Ruth paced once across the office. They are trying to create witnesses before we file. Can they get away with it? They can make it expensive and humiliating. They can make people afraid to contradict them. That was the part nobody tells you about truth. It needs copies, dates, witnesses, and brave people. Ruth filed emergency papers that afternoon. I sat beside her assistant and labeled scans until my vision hurt. The roof invoice, the hospital admission, the July signing photos, the pharmacy list, the developer email. At 4:47, Brooke texted, I am in the meeting. They locked the conference room door. At 4:51, Diane says anyone who refuses is disloyal. At 4:56, Paul just said Maya ruined Arthur's last months. Then nothing. At 5:20, my phone rang from an unknown number. When I answered, all I heard was breathing, a scrape, and Brooke's terrified voice saying, Maya, they found out I sent you the photo. Brooke's call ended with a sharp click. Ruth took my phone and called her back twice. No answer. We cannot rush into that office, Ruth said, grabbing her coat. But we can make the right people uncomfortable. She called the police, the title company, and an employment lawyer. I listened to her say the same facts in 3 tones. Calm for police, dangerous for counsel, icy for the title company. At 6:03, Brooke texted, I am okay. They took my phone during the meeting. I am outside now. Diane says I am suspended pending investigation. I should have felt relief. Instead, rage steadied me. Ruth drove us to a diner near Diane's office because Brooke would not go home. She arrived in a gray coat, eyes swollen, carrying a folder. I printed what I could before they cut my access, she said. Ruth did not touch it. Brooke, you need to understand what this means. I understand I may lose my job. I also understand Diane was going to make me lie about someone who spent years changing bedsheets while we joked about office coffee. Her voice cracked, and I saw the friend who used to bring me leftovers after late shifts. Inside the folder were payroll notes, reimbursements, and invites. Carla's lunch with Paul on March 9th was there. So was a private meeting titled AC Capacity Prep, scheduled 2 days before the new will. AC was Arthur Collins. Paul was not only Diane's operations director. He had signed a broker agreement promising him 2% of the property sale if the house moved into the trust before April 15th. 2% of 7 figures, Ruth said. Brooke nodded. He kept bragging that this deal would fix his divorce. I looked at the page. My uncle had called me greedy while gambling Grandpa's house against his own debts. Diane had asked Mr. Voss to prepare a capacity narrative memo before he had ever met Grandpa. The draft said Arthur appeared decisive, free from pressure, and eager to reduce Maya's influence. The creation date was March 7th. 2 days before the meeting. They wrote the conclusion before the interview. Brooke slid one more paper across the table. There is a recording too. Not from Elise, from the conference room camera. My heart kicked. Is it of Grandpa? No, of Diane and Paul after the signing. She opened her phone, hesitated, then played it low. Diane's voice came through tinny but clear. Once this closes, Maya can scream all she wants. She cannot afford court. Paul answered, and if Ruth shows up? Diane laughed. Ruth is old. Voss says the March document is enough. The diner noise faded around me. Then a new voice entered the recording, a man I did not know. Brooke paused it. That is Grant Bell, the broker. Listen to what he says next. Brooke played the next 10 seconds. Just make sure the granddaughter looks like the problem. The hospital charity board will not want a harassment story around the project launch. I looked at Ruth. Hospital charity board? Brooke wiped under one eye. Diane is pitching it as a community health partnership. Free screenings, elder care support, all the glossy stuff. Your story makes the deal look dirty. Ruth rewound the clip. Grant knew about the narrative. He helped shape it, Brooke said. His PR consultant drafted Elise's captions. It was meetings, memos, captions, planned tiers, community language wrapped around a land grab. Grandpa's death had become a branding risk. My phone buzzed again. It was from Professor Lane. Maya, I received a concerning email about your conduct involving an elderly family member. Please call me before clinical placement next week. I read it twice, then handed it to Ruth. She was trying to poison my future, Brooke whispered. I am so sorry. I could not answer her. My mouth tasted like metal. Ruth called Professor Lane. She said there was an active estate dispute, that allegations were unproven, that I had records. Professor Lane listened, but I could hear caution through the phone. I appreciate the context, the professor said. However, clinical sites are sensitive to elder safety concerns. Until this is clarified, we may need to pause Maya's placement. Pause. Such a clean word for taking away my hours, my scholarship, my path out. I turned away, shaking. That was when Elise called. I almost ignored it, but Ruth nodded for me to answer on speaker. Elise's voice was small. Maya, can we talk without Ruth listening? No, we cannot do that anymore. A pause. Diane says you are destroying everyone. Diane threw my life into a shredder and blamed the noise on me. Elise breathed in sharply. You do not understand what she does when people cross her. She sounded afraid for herself. Then tell the truth, I said. I cannot. She paid my student loans. The words sat between us, ugly and simple. How much money? Ruth asked. Elise went quiet. I said, how much did my silence cost? Elise whispered, $42,000. She said if I helped prove you were pressuring Grandpa, she would put me on payroll and clear the debt. There it was. My cousin had not been confused. She had been purchased. Elise had sent a video file. Her voice shook through the phone. I recorded something on March 9th because I got scared. Diane does not know I kept it. Maya, if I send this, promise she cannot ruin me. The thumbnail loaded slowly. It showed Grandpa in his recliner, eyes half open, Diane kneeling beside him with a pen in her hand. The video would not play at first. The diner Wi-Fi stalled and the loading circle spun over Grandpa's face. When it finally opened, I wished it had stayed frozen. The camera angle was crooked, hidden low, probably Elise's phone. Grandpa sat in his recliner. His cheeks looked hollow. Diane knelt beside him, holding a pen. Paul blocked the window. Grandpa's voice was weak. Where is Maya? Diane answered, She needed a break from you, Dad. We are helping her. He frowned. Maya handles papers. Paul leaned in. Maya is tired. She gets angry. You told us that. Grandpa shook his head slowly. I want Ruth. Ruth is not available. Michael is helping today. You said you wanted the family protected. Mr. Collins, do you understand this document is your will? Grandpa looked toward the door. Maya should read it. Diane put the pen into his fingers. Just sign where Michael marked. We talked about this. The video ended there right before the signature. I did not scream. I folded forward until my forehead touched the diner table because I understood. They had made him ask for me, then erased me while I was stocking gauze at work. Ruth's hand rested on my shoulder. Maya, this is strong evidence of undue influence. Strong evidence does not give him his last day back. Nobody answered that because no one could. I went home with Brooke because Ruth had to prepare filings. Brooke made up the couch and left water beside me. At midnight, my phone started buzzing again. It was comments. Someone had posted an edited version of Elise's live with my speech cut out. In the clip, I looked wild, accusing Diane while police lights flashed. The caption said, Local granddaughter attacks grieving family after being removed from will. She looks guilty. Caregivers abuse elders all the time. Poor aunt. The young ones always want property. I scrolled until Brooke took the phone from me. You cannot keep reading that, she said. They are making him into someone who hated me. No, they are making strangers feel smart for judging you. At 2, Professor Lane emailed again. My clinical placement was paused pending review. At 4, Diane sent a message from an unknown number. Drop the contest by noon, sign a confidentiality agreement, and I will tell the school this was a family misunderstanding. I sat in the dark, numb and emptied out, feeling the trap close. At 6:11 a.m., Ruth called. Her voice was rough, like she had not slept. Maya, the court granted a temporary freeze, but Diane filed something in response. What did she file? A pause. A petition claiming Arthur promised to disinherit you because you financially abused him. She attached bank records, and your signature is on them. For a few seconds, I thought Ruth had misunderstood. My signature could not be on bank records I had never seen. Then she emailed the exhibits, and I felt the floor vanish. There were 3 withdrawal slips from Grandpa's account, each supposedly approved by me. They looked close enough to be dangerous. Not perfect, but close. Like someone had practiced from birthday cards and pharmacy forms. Maya, that is not your signature. It looks enough like mine for strangers to wonder. Ruth called again. Listen carefully. Panic helps them. Patterns help us. So we built patterns. Ruth subpoenaed bank footage. Brooke made a timeline from office calendars. Mrs. Alvarez found doorbell clips. I went through every photo on my phone from the past year and sorted them by date. Grandpa eating soup, Grandpa asleep, Grandpa holding the July will envelope, Grandpa glaring at Diane's SUV. By noon, Professor Lane agreed to accept my care logs. At 2, the bank called Ruth. The January withdrawal had been made in person by Carla. The February withdrawal had been made by Paul. The 3rd had been deposited into Collins Family Holdings on March 9th. Ruth's assistant whispered, "That is almost too neat." Ruth replied, "People who think they are untouchable get lazy." I wanted to believe that. I also wanted to let someone else be brave. Instead, I opened Grandpa's final letter again. Near the bottom, he had written, "Do not fight them where they are loud. Fight them where they leave paper." So that became the strategy. No desperate calls to cousins who chose the safer side. Ruth would file for discovery, send preservation letters to Diane's company, Voss's firm, and Grant's brokerage. Brooke would provide a sworn statement. Mrs. Alvarez and Mateo would do the same. Elise, if she found courage, would authenticate the video. At 5, Elise texted, "Diane knows I called you. She says she will sue me for the loans if I help." I typed, "Tell the truth anyway," then deleted it because courage is easy to demand from someone else. Ruth told me to write, "We cannot advise you, but evidence destruction and false statements can create worse problems. Please get independent counsel." Elise responded, "You sound like Ruth now." I wrote back, "I sound like someone who learned." That evening, Diane's lawyer sent a settlement offer. I could keep $10,000, my car, and family privacy if I signed away all claims and admitted Grandpa removed me. The offer expired at midnight. Ruth read it aloud, then looked at me. "This is not an offer. It is a pressure test." My phone buzzed. A new email arrived from an address I did not recognize. Subject line, "Arthur Collins asked me to wait until you were ready." Attached was a voicemail file from Grandpa's old doctor. The email came from Dr. Helen Marsh, Grandpa's primary doctor, who once told Diane that being old was not a diagnosis. Ruth called her before we opened the file. Dr. Marsh answered on the second ring. "Arthur asked me to send that if Maya contacted an attorney after his death. I was respecting a patient who feared retaliation while alive." "Doctor, are you willing to testify?" "If the court asks, yes, but listen first." The file began with static, then Grandpa's voice. "Helen, it is Arthur. Diane is pushing again. If anything happens, Maya did not take my money. Diane asked me to say Maya was unstable. I told her no. People believe daughters, not granddaughters." My eyes burned. Grandpa continued. "Also, ask Ruth to check the old corporate file from Collins Renovation. Diane borrowed against my house years ago using revoked power of attorney. The loan comes due if the property is not transferred." Ruth stopped the audio. "What old corporate file?" "Arthur owned a renovation company with Diane's late husband. He worried Diane used old paperwork after the husband died." Ruth found the public records. Diane needed the developer money. She had pledged a disputed interest in Grandpa's house as collateral for a business loan tied to Collins Family Holdings. The lender believed the family trust would receive the house. Without it, Diane's company would default. "That is why they moved so fast after his pneumonia," Ruth said. "They were not waiting for inheritance. They were racing a deadline." It was debt dressed as grief. Ruth filed the voicemail, loan records, video, bank evidence, and Brooke's affidavit the next morning. Diane arrived with Paul, Elise, and Mr. Voss, looking expensively calm. I wore the black dress. In the hallway, Diane approached me. "You think winning a motion makes you safe?" "I think Grandpa was smarter than all of you." Her smile barely moved. "Arthur was sentimental. I am practical." Ruth stepped between us. "Save it for the judge." Mr. Voss argued the March will was valid. Family concerns about me were sincere. My campaign had damaged reputations. He said I was young, overwhelmed, and financially motivated. Then Ruth played the video of Grandpa asking for me. The courtroom went still. She played Grant Bell's recording. Paul stared at the table. She played Dr. Marsh's voicemail. Diane's hand slid off her pen. Ruth placed a document on the screen, the business loan with Diane's signature and the collateral description. The judge leaned forward. "Your Honor, this was never about honoring Arthur Collins. It was about covering a loan before the collateral fiction collapsed." Diane whispered something to Voss. He did not answer her. He was staring at the loan document like he had just realized Diane had lied to him too. The judge did not give me the movie moment people imagine. No gavel slam, no dramatic arrest, just a quiet ruling that hit harder because it was real. The March will was temporarily suspended. Diane was removed as proposed trustee. An independent administrator was appointed. Mr. Voss was ordered to explain his role, and the judge referred the signatures and withdrawals to the proper authorities. Diane stayed blank until the word authorities. Then the color left her mouth. Diane looked at me once. "You destroyed this family." For the first time, I did not need to prove my heart was clean. "No, you mortgaged it." The probate battle took months. Justice was paperwork, waiting rooms, ugly emails, and invoices that made me sick until Ruth arranged fees from the estate. Brooke found another job after filing a retaliation complaint. Professor Lane reinstated my placement. Elise testified. She authenticated the video and admitted Diane paid her loans in exchange for helping the family narrative. I have not forgiven her. I also stopped wishing harm on her. Paul resigned before he could be fired. Grant's brokerage cut ties publicly. Voss faced a bar complaint. Diane's company lost the developer deal, defaulted on the loan. None of it brought Grandpa back. None of it erased the humiliation. But the July will stood. The house became mine. The first night I slept there again, I did not celebrate. I washed the kitchen floor. I put Grandpa's cardigan back on his chair. Mrs. Alvarez brought soup. Brooke brought sparkling cider. Mateo fixed the back camera until I almost smiled. Then I opened Grandpa's final letter. The last paragraph said, "If this house becomes a cage, sell it. If it becomes a refuge, keep it. Do not confuse inheritance with obligation. I am leaving you a door, not a chain." That was when I finally cried in a way that belonged only to me. I am finishing nursing school. I still live in the greenhouse. The rest is quiet, sunlit, imperfect, mine. Diane sends messages through relatives sometimes. She says she wants closure. Paul says family should heal. Elise says she understands if I never answer. I never answer. People ask if revenge felt good. Honestly, no. Revenge was too small for what they tried to take. What felt good was the day the county records updated and Grandpa's name and my name sat in the chain of title exactly where he wanted it. They wrote me out of the will because they thought I was just the tired girl beside the hospital bed. They did not know Grandpa had given me a copy. They did not know he had given everyone else a reason to tell the truth. And they really did not know that the person they spent months calling fragile had learned patience from a man who survived them longer than they deserved.
And that's the end of this story. Whose side are you on? Share your opinion in the comments, leave a like, and subscribe with the notification bell on if you want more stories like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.